All right, so our next presenter, Space Age Electronics, Ryan Mongeau is here. We're thrilled to have Ryan back presenting at Adept Experience. He's the Director of Technology and Special Projects Manager for Space Age. He's responsible for implementing and overseeing automated production equipment, managing large logistics and design-intensive projects, and maintaining SAE's no excuses quality management system throughout the organization. The various projects and responsibilities he has undertaken have resulted in IPC 610, 620, and ISO 9001, 2008 to 2015 certifications. His education in mechanical and electrical engineering, machine tooling, CNC machine programming, setup and operation, and industrial robotics, as well as lean manufacturing. Please welcome our friend Ryan Mongeau.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, brother. Much appreciated. How's everybody doing? We're kind of coming down to the end here. You know, it's 2 days. I know it doesn't seem like a lot when, you know, before you start coming out, and then you're here for 2 days and you're sitting. It's amazing how sitting and not really doing anything can be so exhausting. But I look forward to this every year. This is my third year here. It's the second time that Martha has gotten me up here to present. So let's kind of get into it. A little bit about who I am. I'm really bad at talking about myself. I always have a really hard time with it. So I will say that my background is mostly in manufacturing. Space Age is a family business. I'm now the third generation. So I kind of grew up in the business. I'm 27 years old. I feel like I get 26 years and 364 days of on-the-job experience. So I am a private pilot. I've flown all different kinds of, you know, small aircraft, everything from little Cessnas. I've flown a Twin Otter. Now I'm working on a Cirrus SR-22. It's a little bit more high performance. And because I'm not good at talking about myself, Martha said, well, why don't you tell us who your favorite superhero is? So my favorite superhero is Spider-Man. So we'll kind of give you an overview of who Space Age is as an organization. So we are a life safety equipment manufacturer. So we make all kinds of things from fire alarm system components, smoke control system, panels, as well as now we're kind of starting to evolve our business a little bit more to get into some specialty detection and custom engineered solutions for our business partners. So over the past, 5 years, we've really seen our business, just about double. We've invested, close to $5 million in equipment, manufacturing equipment and processes, training for our employees, software, all kinds of different technologies. So what we really want to do is stay at the forefront of manufacturing because we want to be the best at everything that we do. We say that we're not just cutting edge, we want to be the people that are sharpening the blade. So some of the products that we manufacture, we do smoke control panels and graphic enunciators. This one is for Fenway Park. We're from Massachusetts, based in Massachusetts, so Red Sox. Yeah. We also have a lot of off-the-shelf products. Some of them are surge protective devices. A lot of you may or may not see some of these in your buildings. If you ever know that our product exists, it's probably not a good thing. Yeah, life safety, fire alarm, you really don't know it's there until there's a problem. As well as all kinds of different cabinets and enclosures. And as we have evolved our organization over the last, let's see, what are we now, 57 years. We've gotten away from just making off-the-shelf products to now taking a lot of our expertise in manufacturing with electronics and sheet metal and design, and to really start kind of integrating these things together to give our customers more of a value add. As well as, besides just configuring things, we have people now coming to us and say, well, because you have electrical engineering, you have mechanical engineering, you have a full offering of manufacturing capabilities, why don't you take this idea that I have and design it from the ground up? So these are kind of some of the different processes that we have, that are our capabilities. We have a full sheet metal operation. This is everything from the blanking phase. We punch out flat metal and then we bend it up and we'll weld it and we'll put hardware in it and all different kinds of processes like that. To graphic applications, so a lot of these panels, we're going to make it once. We're never going to make it again. So we have, pretty complex graphics, building pictures of buildings and logos and things that we plot directly. We have screen printing capability. We also have flatbed plotting, so we can actually print directly on a piece of metal. SMT electronics, so because we have electrical engineering, our engineering team designs the electronics. We design the PC board. We have surface mount line. We have a through-hole PCB. We have the capability to actually design the electronics, build it ourselves, write the software for it. Wiring, after we've got our PC boards, we got to wire it all up together. We got to test it and ensure that what we're sending out the door is going to operate exactly as it's supposed to, because in a life safety environment, it's pretty significant that things work exactly as they're supposed to the first time. As well as general assembly, we get past the wiring to start putting together some pretty large panels, some really interesting solutions. You might see a couple of them in here. I honestly don't even remember. Did I just shoot that in someone's eye? The inventory of information that we have has really given us a unique set of challenges. Because we have so many different manufacturing operations, I have a pretty substantial inventory of data that I need to manage. I kind of looked this morning and we're just over 150,000 documents, which after you hear Dow and a lot of the other companies around here that have been up here to talk about what their implementation is like, 150,000 is nothing. But for an organization our size, it's a pretty significant amount of data. So what the challenges were, kind of where we came from, is how do we manage all of this data? We had it sounds like kind of everybody came from the same point that we did. You think that you're alone out there sometimes, and you're really not. Everybody at one point or another came from network folders that were all over the place with duplicate versions, with the dash V1, Bob, V3, Greg. It's a really tough thing to manage. So we got to take all that stuff and we got to put a lid on it. So I got to figure out, how do I stop people from accidentally deleting it and moving it? And show of hands, how many people have had an engineer say, "Oh, I didn't do that. I don't know what you're talking about." It's only broadcast on the internet. Don't worry about it. And because of the nature of some of the products that we manufacture, it's something I'm going to make once, and I have to keep a record of it indefinitely. So how do I find that needle in a haystack file that looks exactly like the 150,000 other ones that are in there? And it needed to be something that was accessible to not just the people in CAD. It needs to be accessible by the people in manufacturing. It needs to be accessible by the people in sales and customer service. Everybody needs to have some sort of path to this data. And as we continue to grow, we're trying to build a footprint for something that I can, we develop this manufacturing operation, and as we grow, 5-10 years down the road, we're opening up facilities, who knows where. I need to be able to copy and paste this manufacturing operation someplace else. And this allows us to build a footprint to do that. So obviously, I'm standing up here. We chose Adept as our solution. Couple reasons on that. I think number one, and a lot of people, customers have really recognized this, the class of support that Synergist offers is miles ahead of any other solution out there. It's kind of when you think about software and you think about software support, it's just not something that we're accustomed to, and it's really a shame. Software vendors, they just really kind of grind you into the ground, push you off, figure it out yourself. It's not something that you get when you work with a company like Synergist, because you know that you have a team of people behind you as an administrator that can support your operation, because at the end of the day, it's the lifeblood of any organization is the data that you have to manage. It's very, very easy to deploy and manage something like Adept because you have so many different access options. You've got the guys in CAD, their SolidWorks, their AutoCAD, that have their task pane, they have their desktop application, which is great, but now I have, like I said, all these other people in our manufacturing operations that also need to be able to really easily get, let's say a program, or they need to get an install instruction or a label or whatever it might be. They need to have a really easy way that doesn't necessarily have all the features and capabilities that somebody in engineering is going to need, but they still need to be able to have access to that same pool of data. And my favorite thing, particularly about this solution compared to others, I'm not naming any names like SolidWorks, the Adept solution wraps around your existing file structure. And I really can't stress enough how important this is. Particularly, I guess maybe I'm a little bit biased, but if you have a lot of other applications that are tied to an existing file structure, it's not going to take all those files and rename them to some GUID that makes absolutely no sense and then put them in a database. And now if there was ever some sort of disaster situation, I don't have to call a vendor for an export tool to copy all that stuff back out, and then I just get this big pool of stuff that I have no idea what to do with. So this, for us, was really one of the biggest factors on choosing Adept over some other solutions. I'm not saying that's the only reason, but for us it was a very big determining factor. I'm a big fan of that. I'm kind of a little paranoid when it comes to disaster recovery. We've heard the stories of the ransomwares. We've been hit not by ransomware, but we have had people get in and just wreak havoc, delete a bunch of stuff, and it's a gift that keeps on giving. You recover from it, and you find years down the road somebody saying, "Oh, I can't find that." It's like, "Oh yeah, that was part of the great data deletion of 2012." So let's kind of get to where we are today. I think this is now our third year of really being on the Adept platform. So we're going to kind of get a little bit of an insight on how we as an organization think and how we've kind of leveraged some of these tools that come with Adept to really streamline our engineering and manufacturing operations. So task pane is, I was kind of disappointed that we didn't see as many hands go up where people that are actually using this. Task pane is a super powerful tool. And it's because we know everybody that uses the desktop application knows all of these features that are baked into it and how powerful it is. You can see a part, you can see where it's used in umpteen different assemblies, and I can see a history of everything that's happened to it. I can tell who did it, why they did it, and being able to leverage the power of the Adept desktop application, use that inside my CAD application is really where it's at. Our mechanical design is almost exclusively in SolidWorks. We do have some legacy AutoCAD that we're kind of, as we get to it, it's getting switched over to SolidWorks. But how do we take that engineering process and really streamline it for the engineers? Because if it's faster for them and they're getting a lot of this data entry in up front, whether it's manually or whether it's programmatically, you can see those benefits downstream when you get to a manufacturing operation. There we go. Okay. So I'm going to kind of just give you a little snippet on exactly how this would work for us in an engineering situation. So what you're seeing here is it's just grabbing an assembly out of the task pane, dropping it into SolidWorks, and there's nothing else to it. That's it, just click and drag. So the benefit to this, and Chris kind of touched on it yesterday, is if I'm trying to copy out this assembly and there's, let's say, 100 children to it, and I miss one of them, and you know the one that you miss is the one that you're going to need, I don't have to go through, find that, whatever, maybe it's a screw, maybe it's a bracket, maybe whatever it is. And I don't have to now find it, bring it into the assembly, fix all the mates, and it's stuff that you shouldn't have to do in the first place. All of that's handled by the task pane. So if I'm, and it honestly is this fast. It's as fast as just clicking and dragging, and now you have an assembly. There's no other steps that you have to take. So if I couple something like that with the functions of the search capabilities in Adept, what you're seeing here is just a screw, one particular screw. And here I'm going to show you a bunch of different screws of the same thread pitch. Well, if I'm in an assembly and I need to add one particular part, it's very easy to just open up the task pane, search for it. Maybe I know roughly what it is. Maybe I need I need a rubber grommet. Well, I can just search grommet and find all of them, find the exact one I need, drag it into the assembly. If it doesn't work, just delete it, find another one, drag it in. That's it. It's as simple as that. This, I don't think, is for people that aren't yet using the task pane. Maybe you're on an older version of Adept. The 2018 and previous task pane was a great product. But everything that the team at Synergist has done to rewrite this into the now 2018.1 task pane, it's a completely different experience for the CAD users. I really encourage you to look at the possibility of upgrading to the most current version just for this. Your design engineers have the ability to stay in their CAD application and never leave it. It's a completely baked solution that's built right into your CAD application. So what we can do with this is I can now start to, as an engineer, I put my engineering hat on, I can step back and start to address some of the risks that come with making a change to a component that's part of, this here you can see is just a random part, and down here is all of the different assemblies that it has a relationship to. So now what I can do as an engineer is I say, I'm going to make a change to, let's say, this bracket. I'm not exactly sure what this part is that I have up here. If I'm going to make a change to this bracket and I have it in 30 other assemblies, well, how do I know what effect that's going to have downstream? What I don't want to do is, as a manufacturer, produce a lot of 500 of something and then get to the phase where we're starting to put it together and see, crap. That change that we made, I'm going to have a collision with this, or maybe I accidentally removed a hole that something else depends on. It allows an engineer to now start to kind of think forward instead of just, making the change and stopping there. It's making you a lot more proactive to make better decisions downstream, because that at the end of the day, that all equates to money. And we kind of, I don't know if one of the previous screenshots showed it, but we also built, everybody has an engineering change order system. Nobody likes it. It's a pain for everybody. So what we did is we took this legacy system that was completely dependent on paper. We would print out a form that would have to get filled out, and now I'm printing out copies of drawings and marking them up, and I'm filling out what I have to, and then I'm walking it down to somebody else, and they got to do it, and maybe it sits on their desk for 6 months because they forgot about it. What this is going to do, or the way that we have it now built in Adept, is because it's now a completely digital workflow, it's, once one person completes their action, it goes on to the next one. So it kind of protects, it protects all of that information in a way that it keeps all of the, the human error from creeping into the process. And as a just as good practice, we need to keep a history of all of this stuff. Well, we can print it out and stick it in a folder and keep it on a shelf for the rest of history, or just keep a digital copy of it. So the objective is to kind of get from this massive paper to a solution that is completely digital. And it's something that it doesn't sound like a lot, but you think about all the time that you spend throughout a year just processing paperwork, and you add all that up. If you could remove even half of it, think about all the time that you're saving. Now you're not adding extra resources just for processing paper. It's 2019. We got to start thinking past that. So this doesn't really look like much, but if you think about, now I have all of these records for change orders in a system. Now, that's kind of what we're seeing here. Well, because we have all the records and we have all of these different extractable fields that we can do, it's not just a list, but now I'm also replacing a manual log for all of this stuff. Because I have information like who did it, when they did it, why they did it, I can start adding things like reason codes, expected completion dates. So now I'm not managing a completely separate log that, anybody could just go in and do anything with. Maybe it gets deleted, somebody accidentally enters the wrong information. If I make this information automatically or display it in a way that is a little bit more intelligent, I'm looking at my process and finding another way to make the data work for us. Doesn't seem like much, but I would say probably, let's say 30% of ECOs that we processed, there was something wrong with them because somebody didn't either fill it out right, or maybe it got entered into the log wrong. We constantly have wrong reason codes or wrong ECO numbers. Well, the ECO number itself comes from the auto name feature, which is great. If you want a new one, just say new ECO. It copies the template for the ECO form, and that's it. All of that information gets automatically added. So the data card, I fill out the data card, all of that stuff is pushed directly into the document and subsequently is visible in the log view. So I touched on briefly just that paper packet. So what we do now is we take that ECO form and all of the different, all the affected parts get related to it. So the ECO form is the parent. And now I can see all of those different parts very easily. That's this right here. It might be a little blurry, sorry about that. So now what's great about that is I can do that the other way. If I have a part, I can also, instead of doing a view of the children, I can see where it was used. So I can see the history of changes for any particular part throughout the entire history of when we turned Adept on this day until today, which is great because you start looking back 2 or 3 years and like, why the heck did we do that? That was dumb. Well, maybe it was a directive from a customer or a component wasn't available anymore. I can go back and see exactly what happened years in the past. And because of the nature of business that we're in, we have a lot of different regulatory agencies that were responsible to meeting their requirements. We're an ISO 9001 registered organization, so we have a bunch of different processes and procedures in place that we need to A, follow, and B, prove that we can follow. So it's probably one of the most tedious aspects of being in business, especially today. People are asking for this more and more. We have a good portion of our products are UL listed, so how do I take that listing data? Well, if I copy all that listing data and put it in Adept and I just, I pull up any random part, I get a view of all the different subassembly pieces. I can see the UL listing documentation. I can see maybe it's a CSFM for California. It needs to be listed specifically for California. I get a really easy view on exactly all of the different requirements for any particular product. We have probably in excess of 10,000 different SKUs that we could get an order for at any time. So it becomes a challenge to figure out how we take all of that information and put it together. So as an ISO organization, we have our entire QMS system is managed in Adept. So we don't just keep our engineering documentation, we keep our processes and procedures, we keep our work instructions, our production documentation. Maybe it's just like a setup sheet, or things like if I want to keep QMS records like my inspection reports or my ECOs, my corrective actions. It's all stuff that I need to keep a history of as an organization that's ISO listed. Maybe you're AS9100. It's all information that you need to keep and you need to track. Well, if you leverage the features that are in Adept, it makes a completely hands-off system. So now you're not managing this data over here, that data over there. Well, one, at the end of the day, affects the other. So it makes sense for the way that we looked at it to put it all together in the same system. Same thing with forms. We talked about the ECOs, ECO form, a vacation request. All of those forms and documents and marketing sheets and everything. If it's digital, we store it in the Adept system. Same thing with external documents. If a customer sends us a specification, well, throw it in there, relate it to the part that we designed for it. We get a really easy view up and down of all the different related pieces of any particular item in our system. And what's great about that is when you have your ISO auditor come in, this was something that happened for us this year. That recertification audit time comes around, and nobody looks forward to that. It's absolutely miserable. And they say, this is your procedure for document control. This is your procedure for maintaining and protecting records. Well, I can say, this is what we say we do, and I manage the entire thing in this document management system. And at the end of the day, our auditors walked away and they said, I've never seen another organization utilize a piece of technology the way that you guys utilize this. A lot of people, what they'll do is they'll implement for engineering and then they'll just stop there. Well, there's a lot of other pieces that you can start to think about. Well, I need to keep control of it. I need to keep it protected. Well, if you have Adept, why not utilize those features? So the space age mantra is live lean. If you walk through our facility, it's pretty apparent. 5S is a big thing for us. Lean manufacturing. So we look at any operation. It doesn't matter what it is. It could be a manufacturing operation. It could just be a data-driven operation, how a sales order gets from customer service, entering the order, to scheduling to cut work orders for it. We look at all the steps that are a part of that, and we decide, is this a value add for us, or is it just something that, we've just done it forever, so we just keep doing it. If you say anywhere inside the four walls of any of our facilities, that's the way we've always done it, I will personally run at you and kick you as hard as I can. We don't accept that as an answer. So what we try to do is step back, look at what we're doing, and figure out how can I make it faster? How can I automate it? The Japanese have this word. Anybody that's in manufacturing, and even if you're not, you've probably heard the word Kaizen. It's a word, it means good change. So we really take that to heart when we're looking at what we're doing. So what the idea is, and I challenge you guys to do this, to think about right now what frustrates you more than anything. Outline the steps of what it actually takes to get from point A to point B. Figure out the ones that are value added, that are not value added, and start thinking about, well, how can I automate it? How can I maybe do this just a little bit differently so that I'm on a Friday night not ripping my hair out because I'm just doing this old archaic process that we've done forever. But don't just go back and start changing things and said, well, this guy from Space Age said we could do it. So that kind of brings us to where do we go from here? So we had our phase one where we spun up and we start importing all of our documents. Jeff was the man for getting us all set up. And then we get to phase two, which is where we start integrating some of these different systems. So I start looking at my MRP system and I have my item master. Well, why don't I just start pulling some of this data in and automatically updating the data card with it? What if I do something like maybe we're building out our workflows for things like the engineering change orders or just general updates? How is that going to flow through the system? Or creating the links between all different types of data. SolidWorks does a really good job with the way it relates files, but there's also all kinds of other supporting documentation. We've got our CNC code, we've got our setup sheets, we've got our random work instructions. Well, let's figure out how we take all that stuff and put it together. So I'm not going to a bunch of different areas to grab all these different data points. If I could just enter in one search criteria and get it all at once, that's really the way to be. And that was kind of our phase two, kind of where that brings us up to where we are right now. And then we start thinking about phase three. So kind of getting back to that live lean thing, I need to start, or we as an organization need to start stepping back and saying, well, what sucks and what doesn't? And maybe we're going to do something like, we're going to do a better job integrating our MRP system. So I have a bill of material in the MRP. Well, why can't I start getting it to automatically create the relationships between some of these files? What if I want to do something like our CNC equipment? If I have a job queued up, go and grab the programs all by yourself. Don't make me go into some, the web client or the desktop client and grab the ones I need and bring them out and stick them on the machine. Figure out how to do, maybe we can do that programmatically so that it knows exactly what files it needs to do, or where it needs to grab, where it needs to put them, and it's completely hands-off. That's kind of eliminating some possible human error. The ultimate goal for us is to go 100% paperless. That's my vision. I see us someday as mobile support becomes more and more on the forefront. How do I get away from having paper prints and paper work orders and picking tickets and all that stuff, and how do I just give somebody a tablet? And if I can get all these systems interconnected to each other and figure out ways to get the data to work for us a little bit more efficiently, then we really start making some serious improvements. I don't know what it is, but just seeing stacks of paper really bothers me. So that's kind of the situation. So I'm open for any questions.
So when you're talking about, say, taking a set of instructions that you have put together, GL code, for example, and you want to push it out to your CNC, fabrication area, what's your vision? How do you plan on using Adept to do that?
So any job in our system is going to have a work order for it. So if I know that this work order is active, well, I know in that work order is going to have all the different subparts that I'm going to need to make. So if I show that as active, if I can figure out how to make Adept talk to the MRP system, so I have that part, I know I'm making it right now. Well, if right now is the time, just grab it and drop it. There's after listening to John and Charlie talk this afternoon, it kind of opened a couple of thought doors for us, and how can maybe I use something like Integrator to solve that?
So you're thinking about incorporating Integrator to push out the GL code to wherever it needs to go, right?
Right.
Okay.
You were talking about your ECO process.
Yep.
We've been looking at how to do ECOs through the plants and stuff. One of the questions we always come up with is, what do we do with the attachments? And I've thought about ECOs in Adept, and it's just, how do I get my attachments so that this thing makes sense.
So I guess what kind of attachments are we talking about?
Red line markups, different, sometimes they mark it up out in the field, bring it in and say, hey, we need to change this. Sometimes it's a markup that's coming from inside Adept.
I mean, there's really nothing to, we run into every once in a while, like maybe it's a picture or it's a PDF. Because the ECO form itself is a Word document, I can just drag and drop those right in there. So it's part of that document, so I'm not adding a bunch of extra stuff in there and then having to manually relate it. That's kind of how we got around that. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Hey, Ryan. Back here in the corner.
Yep.
Kudos to you. I mean, you are the shining example of an administrator that has taken ownership of the systems.
Thank you, sir.
That's serious props for that. If we can go to the ECO, a couple technical questions. You guys use fixed or float default relationship behavior?
Float.
Float. So then when you get, because I notice your ECOs are Excel spreadsheets, not transmittals. At the end of that process, do you guys do anything to fix those relationships?
No, because I can go back in the audit trail and I can see when it went from Rev A to Rev B. So for us, it was good enough. It just added a bunch of extra steps to have to remember to go back and manually fix the relationships. I still get the where use and the children in both directions by just staying float. I haven't run into an issue where I've said, oh man, I wish that was a fixed child.
Right. And who creates those relationships? Is that the ECO form filler outer?
Yes.
Got it. Thank you.
Yep.
You guys are starting to. You were talking about earlier that you were trying to integrate it into obviously different groups. Do you guys have like a quality group or validation group, and are you using Adept to kind of serve those particular departments?
That's not something that we have right now, but it's something that we're actively working on implementing. Getting a department that's directly responsible for the quality checks and the first articles and things like that. So we, when we get to that point, yeah, we would figure out some way. Maybe it's, their fair documentation or their inspection documentation. It's still a record that I would need to keep a history on. There's nothing to stop me from making a workflow that's really easy for somebody to fill out a document and finish it up and that be that.
And Martha,
Does that work?
Yeah, no, I'm just curious because at some point I feel like that's where I would like to see the go.
Yeah, we're not quite there yet, but it's a big action item for us to get done over the next 6-8 months.
Yep. We did that with CP. Created the whole ECO process or ECM or whatever you want to call it, and you could attach different documents and that sort of thing to the ECO, as well as put in all the first article notifications and through the QA process and whatnot. But that was done through CP, so it is doable, and then doing it through the workflow.
That's definitely a good outlook. Thank you.
Hi, I have one question about the the document you store in the Adept system. When you audit, because everything is electronics.
Yep.
So, like say, for example, some local authority come to audit. So they said, okay, well, I want a document A. So you go to the Adept system and going to print out for them.
Yes.
So do you have any case when an auditor comes and you couldn't find a document?
I have never had that issue.
Okay.
And I think it's because we keep our entire inventory of data in there that there's never a question of, is it in Adept or is it someplace else? It kind of eliminates that as a question.
Very good. The other question is, I see your database have like 6 category, different type of the document, right? You got procedure, work instructions, and production document, QMS record, and forms, external documents.
Mm-hmm.
So when you design the data card, you know, right now Adept don't really say, okay, you have a different document type, and then you have a different metadata set, right? So, and because you have 6 different category type of document, your database, all the metadata will be across the board, right?
Yes.
So how many, I would say, data field do you have?
That's a good question. I would say probably 20, but not all of those 20 are used for each document type.
Okay, so the follow-up question, because you have 6 different type of document, one, do you have a DOM controller to upload this document in the system?
So the process owner is responsible for managing that. We don't have a person that's directly responsible for doc control. We let doc control be handled by the Adept system. So as you know, somebody that's doing their ECO, they're responsible for getting it in, making the appropriate relationships, and managing the workflow. Engineering is the same thing. They're responsible for getting their documents in, making sure that the information that's on the data card is what it's supposed to be. That's kind of our approach to it.
Okay, so how you can make sure the user pick the right data card to do the search, because you have the 6 different type?
So based on the user, we dictate what data card is their default. So they're not, an engineering user isn't accidentally going to get the data card that's maybe for corrective actions or ECOs. So as an engineer, they have their data card that they work with. Other users have their data card that they work with.
Do you allow them to switch?
On certain cases, yes. Some people that wear multiple hats, so they're going to have to bounce back and forth between data cards. It's not very frequent for us, but it does happen.
Thank you.
Yep.
Did I hear you right when you said you put everything in Adept? Vacations, schedules, whatever. Okay, my question is, how did you get buy-in from those other people?
So it kind of gets back to what a lot of other people have really said, is you have to get support from the highest level in your organization. So now we start talking about, we have all of these different types of data, and we start thinking about, how can we improve this process? If we get support from the high, our president who's here, that's my dad right there, it really doesn't get any higher than that. If you can get support from the top to start figuring out how to put these processes in Adept, that's really how you get it done.
So you don't have another file server, so to speak. You don't have an Oracle database, or you're not using SharePoint, or you're not.
No, we are not.
Cool. All right. I don't have a dad to push this through, so.
My situation's a little different than probably everybody else here. I get a little bit of extra sway.
Hi, I had a question about your migration. You mentioned you had 150,000 files. We have well over 1 million. And we're using Adept, and we've got probably 50,000 files in or so. How long did it take to get all of your legacy data into Adept? And do you have any tips on how to make it easier?
I would say start as small as you possibly can. Don't try, I think in hindsight, I probably would have done it a little bit differently. I said, this is the capability of Adept. All of these documents have relatively the same process that they're a part of. Let's just put them all in at the same time. The downside of that is that you don't really get all the metadata unless you have it set up perfectly. So we end up having to go back and do a lot of cleanup. So when we set it up, we actually did 2 vaults, our production vault, I guess you could say, and then a second vault that has the exact same structure as the production vault, but it's all of that legacy data. So as it gets touched that first time, it gets assigned to an administrator who is myself, and I make sure that it's filled out properly, that because it's something that we maybe haven't touched in 10 or 15 years. I make sure that all of that information is filled out right, and then move it up into the production vault. So everybody has access to both vaults, because if they only have access to the production, they're not going to get any access to that legacy data. But if it comes from the legacy data pool, it has a couple extra touch points to make sure that it's got quality data associated to it.
One more question in the back.
Ryan, you said you guys put all of your documentation into Adept.
Mhm.
What are you doing with regard to your sales documentation, like quotes, sales orders? And
That's all part of our MRP,
Okay.
so that stays
That's a
there.
totally different system then.
It's a totally different system.
Yeah.
Now, it's something that we're looking at putting into Adept.
Okay.
Because our system, it's so old,
Yeah.
we don't have the luxury of having an API.
Mhm.
We would have to come up with some clever ways, maybe it is with Integrator, to generate that documentation.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's something that we're actively talking about. Actually, my dad and I
Okay.
have been bickering back and forth on that for the past
Okay.
2 days.
Cool, thanks.
Yeah.
I just have a real quick one. Ryan, why is the new task pane better than the previous iteration?
All right, so number one, my engineers, when we rolled out the new task pane, were psyched that they didn't have to have the desktop application open at the same time as their CAD program. We had run into some issues, not saying that the old task pane was bad, it's just not nearly as good as the new one. If you drop a network connection and you're doing something in SolidWorks, well, now I have to close down SolidWorks, I have to close down Adept, and I have to open them back up and then figure out where I left off. Now them being separated, they have, when they pull up SolidWorks, because it goes through the web API, which is super reliable and super fast, it makes that aspect of it for them a lot easier. And then when they're working in a sandbox, they're not necessarily doing a full-scale design, maybe they're just messing around, they would have to go and disable all of the Adept integration in SolidWorks so that they weren't getting a bunch of prompts and this and that. Well, now they just log out, and then they're not bothered, and when they need to start adding documents into Adept, they just log back in.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Ryan.